Welcome to the Motoring Podcast, your weekly discussion of motoring news. This is episode 507 on Wednesday, the 4th of January, 2023. Hello, I'm Alan.
And I'm Alex. And this week we'll be discovering how the Geospatial Commission is finding more uses for geospatial data, funnily enough, about how restoring Land Rovers is good for your mental health, and all about a very diverse Volkswagen reshuffle.
Yeah, there is some follow-up. So do you want to head into, there's just a couple of things to talk about very, very quickly before we get into the new news.
Yeah, sure. And first is news that the Department for Transport is appealing a Freedom of Information request from Professor Greg Marsden at the University of Leeds Institute for Transport Studies. This was aimed at kind of getting hold of the traffic assumptions behind the UK's transport decarbonisation plan, so how vehicles are used and the impact of COVID-19 on travel. Essentially, the idea is that he's looking to scrutinise the data behind it and find out how these decisions are being made and prevent future policies being made without access to the underpinning evidence. So it's an ongoing challenge to try and get hold of that data.
Mm-hmm. So the key assumption out of this was the information on which the 2030 plan was based, wasn't it?
Yes.
And so EVs only after 2030, and even then that was brought forward again based on this data, and so we thought it was quite interesting and good. We obviously, Andrew and I discussed it before about being able to actually see and understand what that data was. Department of Transport really not that keen on sharing, it seems.
Yes, it sets a slightly worrying precedent for future policy making if you can push decisions like this through without being able to get hold of the foundations on which it's based.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it is only an appeal. The appeal hasn't been denied yet, but it'll be interesting to see what the thoughts are.
Absolutely.
Comes out of that. One other piece of follow-up was about the Continental Cyberattack. They seem to, previously they've been very, very quiet about it. They hadn't really said anything. They have released, it'll be linked in the show notes, some Q&A on that, what people got hold of, why it happened the way it did, why Continental didn't detect it, all these kind of things. If you want more information on that, if that's something which you're interested in, but either personally or professionally, then there'll be a link in the show notes to the webpage that Continental put together. They weren't great at being very clear that this had happened in the first place. There does seem to have been a change of tack now to share as much as they can realistically share about that. So yes, if you want to find out more, there'll be a link in the show notes to that Continental webpage. Which brings us to some new news.
Yes, and this is a story that began breaking before Christmas and everything shutting down over Christmas. This is a follow-up piece in that Car Dealer magazine had reported that Stellantis dealers were claiming that they'd been forced to ask customers to register and pay for cars they hadn't actually received, and that a lot of this stock was actually sort of sitting around, in docks and so on. Managing Director Paul Wilcox, is the Senior Vice President and Group Managing Director at Stellantis, has said it's his number one priority to fix these problems, and actually hasn't denied the accusations. He said that they were needed to improve its stock turn velocity. So, in other words, that to have the cars there, having the cars in the UK was required to kind of secure future capacity from factories, which, as you know, at the moment is not a very easy thing to do, given the kind of global shortages of components and particularly semiconductor chips and so on. So, not denying it, but kind of saying it's a priority to get on and fix that and kind of move on from that crisis. But
in some cases, people was then it was saying that dealers were saying that basically Stellantis wanted them to register vehicles that were in some cases still on boats,
Yes.
or was still a few months out, meaning that people would have to start paying lease payments and deposits and everything on vehicles that they weren't going to get for months in some cases, which I don't know. We're all kind of familiar with pre-registration, but this seems a little bit.
Yeah, this is bringing the customers in as well, which is a very different situation.
I mean, I understand. I absolutely understand. The logistical issues, as you say, chips and supply chain and all these kind of things. But this seems bad to me. Not to mince my words too much, this seems bad to me because, as you say, it's bringing the customer into it, and it's the customer who's having to, who's having to basically pay up for not getting anything. At that point, a vehicle they've not even seen. That's really where it's bad on this. I'm not. I mean, it would be unfortunate and annoying, and if it was just all within the dealer network, and within Stellantis's supplying network, but I think bringing the customer in and knocking it that far up is not a good look.
No, it's a tricky time to be buying a new car at the moment. Anyway, I mean, the lead times are only one part of it. There's I've seen reports of prices changing between ordering and delivery, which in some cases people have been protected from, but also we've had massive increases in interest rates in the UK over the last 12 months, which have in a lot of cases have to be passed on to the consumer. So you find that people will order cars, and by the time they come to have them delivered, are dealing with quite a different situation. And also on top of that, there's been this is obviously separate to Stellantis, but kind of connected into the same world of pain that everyone's going through at the moment. Is we've had delays in terms of taxation announcements and so on as well. So people are ordering cars, maybe waiting a year, 18 months for them to be delivered. And in some cases, if they're keeping those cars for 3 or 4 years and they're company cars, they could end up paying completely. They were doing so until fairly recently, assuming that there'd be kind of gradual increases in tax and so on, which is not the case. So it's a tough time to be buying at the moment.
Yeah, no, but
and this
tough
is
time
not
to be
helping.
selling as well. Yeah, hard one. Anyway, let's move on, shall we, to something a little bit better news, perhaps, and that's that it's been announced that Toyota's Deeside plant in North Wales is going to get investment to support the new 5th generation hybrid engine platform which is going out. So that obviously the 5th generation replaces the 4th generation. You'd think that would be obvious, but not always. Which they've been making since 2016. So that's pretty good. I mean, that's a good sign generally. Although £465,000 is peanuts to Toyota, I guess. That's a good sign generally that people are investing in building in the UK, and it makes sense for Toyota because, of course, they've got the Deeside plant supplies the Burniston factory and Corolla manufacture and stuff in the UK.
And also good news in Wales, where we've lost Ford 18 months ago, we've got some question marks over what's going to happen with TVR going forward and whether that's going to stay in Ebbw Vale now that they've paid off the Welsh Government debt and so on. I think that, as far as I know, that's not been confirmed where they're going to end up. But it's nice to know that there's some kind of investment being grounded in Wales.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, TVR does seem analogous to the Tesla Cybertruck in my mind these days. So there is a vehicle. There's a vehicle.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll see what happens. Obviously, it would be good if it stayed there and if it existed, but we'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, the exciting thing with that, of course, is that there was the announcement last year about it going electric and so on. So it's not. I had my concerns about Wales getting kind of technology with a shelf life. In that if the Griffith was going to be a V8, it was going to have a limited amount of time that it could be produced before things would need to be kind of restarted from the ground up. feels a bit more. So we'll see. But yes, it's nice to see Toyota investing in, because obviously D-Side as well is the only factory making hybrid engines outside Japan as well. So it's
is it? I didn't actually know that.
I believe so. So it's nice to have that nice to have that in Wales.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of British sports car companies, there's some news at Morgan as well, isn't there?
Yes, Morgan, which is very definitely building cars, has appointed a new non-executive chairman, Lawrence Price, who, despite his surname, is the great-grandson of the company's founder, HFS Morgan. He was appointed as non-executive director in 2012, and he's going to work alongside CEO Massimo Fumarola to kind of continue developing the brand going forward. So it's obviously not a huge volume manufacturer, but again, a very interesting, innovative company based within the UK. So
can you remember? There's not many. Okay, maybe a couple of decades ago, that you wouldn't really have described Morgan as being innovative, would you?
And yeah,
it's kind of funny how that's changed.
Yeah, kind of steady performance, and kind of, they've kind of carried on, and they seem to be moving with the times. It's nice to see.
It's kind of funny. They're quite good at just getting on with it. I know that sounds a bit dumb and a bit of a put down. It's really not meant that way, but
yes, that actually kind of puts it better than how I meant. I don't mean they're not just carrying on with what they're doing, but they're not kind of going, we're going to quadruple our volume within a year and do something really ridiculous. They're just kind of quietly responding to what people want and moving forward with evolving the brand as they go. So.
Yes, they've had no. I've forgotten his name now. That was going to be really witty. What was a Lotus guy?
Oh God, yes, I can't remember either.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well,
I know the guy you mean, and I can't think. They're all screaming. Everyone's going to be screaming at. Yeah,
exactly. Yes, but they've not had that. They've not had to put up with any of those moments, and long may that continue. I think.
They're not a company that permanently seems to be on the brink of bankruptcy and been changing hands the whole time.
No. Although Lotus doesn't seem to be doing that right at the minute, which is. It's almost unnerving, really, isn't it? But yeah,
it's the Geely, steadying hand of Geely.
Yes. Here's some money. Get on with it, please.
Yes. Yeah.
Companies that are shuffling and changing around quite a lot. Volkswagen Group. Volkswagen Group has announced a major strategic reshuffle, as is its way, and of course, this happened just before Christmas. But yes, they have moved the world around once again. So yes, as part of that change, as well as the new CEO Oliver Bloom, then Michael Mauer is going to become head of group design, with Klaus Zisiora to leave the company. Mauer is also going to remain in position at Porsche. Michael Neumeier will replace Frank Welsh as head of group quality. Neumeier retains his position as head of quality at Audi, etc., etc. You can tell this is the usual old Volkswagen reshuffle, isn't it? It's mostly the same people being shuffled around a little bit and sort of changing their seats at the table, possibly to get a better view of the coffee machine. It's a Volkswagen reshuffle. There we go. That's really all we needed to say. You probably all guessed that it was the same middle-aged men moving from seat to seat.
So, returning to Britain and British sports car manufacturers, Autocar is reporting that Lawrence Stroll and the U-Tree Investment Group have increased their shareholding in Aston Martin, up from 19% to 28.29%. Which is an investment of around 50 million pounds. Apparently, this is to block Geely, who we were talking up just a few minutes ago, from taking over the company. So
I'd forgotten this story was coming up when we were talking about British sports cars. Sports car manufacturers always on the brink of bankruptcy and new ownership. but yes, Aston Martin is the absolute epitome of that, even more so than TVR, I suppose. Yeah, there's what more can we say on this one, really? Geely was quietly upping its percentage of Aston Martin. But yeah, well, Lawrence Stroll seems to be deepening his investment. I can't work out. I don't understand why. You would have thought he would have been quite pleased that there was another company keen to maybe pay a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, especially considering the business as usual, unfortunately, it seems to be this kind of, stepping stone kind of,
You see, that's more polite than me. That's more polite than me. I was going to say roller coaster.
Yeah, roller coaster is another way, I guess, of putting it. But I can. It would seem like it would be quite, as I say, we're saying a steadying pair of hands with Lotus earlier. Who knows? It might actually be quite a welcome investment in terms of kind of steadying the boat a bit, but not to be at the moment, apparently.
No. Well, he has made a lot of changes at Aston. Changes were made at Aston Martin, and then changes have been unmade at Aston Martin to steady it. So maybe he feels that he's already steadied it, and it doesn't need any more right at the moment.
We shall see.
Possibly. Anyway, should we moving from sports cars to personal mobility and rental e-scooters? There's been a report out by by the Department of Transport, an independent report, and it's been evaluating how the national e-scooter trials have been going. If you're a regular listener, you know all the background to e-scooter trials, and you know that they've been, whilst the government and Department of Transport are still trying to work out just what might constitute a legal e-scooter for people to own and use. Then the only way to legally use electric scooter personal mobility device thingamies in the UK is, or on the road and outside of private land in the UK, is to use one of the e-scooter rental services that are around the country. So they've published this. There are 5 key followings. I mean, Alex, have you experienced, tried, played with any of these e-scooter trials? Is there one around you?
No, we've got bikes around here, which kind of seem to end up. Sorry, I should say that I live in Cardiff. There are kind of racks of shared bikes around the place near train stations and such like. But I've seen quite a few of them dumped and abandoned, and quite a few times the one up near us is empty. I haven't yet tried any of the e-scooters. I have fallen off every single scooter that I've ever tried, so I'd probably end up injuring myself if I were to try one.
Even I can ride an e-scooter without being too wobbly and fally offy, and I have no background in motorcycles or anything like that at all, and not great at. I'm all right at the whole balance thing, I suppose, but I'm not great shakes at it.
It wasn't the balance. In the last one that I fell off, somebody had fitted a chainsaw motor to or something, and it wasn't particularly quick, but it was quick enough that I slightly steered ever so slightly too much and just flipped straight over the handlebars.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that sounds like a skill.
Yes, it wasn't. It must have looked more. It was in front of quite a lot of people in the pit lane of a track day. So, not something I'm looking to repeat.
No, well, the e-scooters, that kind of thing is less likely to happen, I promise you, partly because they probably won't work in the pit lane at a track day. But there were 5 sort of key takeaways from this. The first one, and I'll let obviously link in the show notes, blah, 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 as usual. But yeah, so the 5 takeaways. First one was that e-scooters were popular, and their usage has changed over time. So the average trip now covers 1.4 miles, lasts about 14 minutes, and a far more point-to-point use as well. The only other thing is that most people said they would have walked instead of using an e-scooter, something that Andrew and I, something that I confessed to, and that Andrew and I discussed a few weeks ago, was actually saying that, if you're saying this is a more ecological way of getting around, then in actual fact, 42% of users said that they would have walked instead, and surely that's more ecological than ever having to sort of charge a battery and then particulates from the tires and all these other fun things.
And also getting some exercise, I suppose.
And also getting some exercise, yes. And I was being a lazy trog.
And not falling off them.
And not falling off them. But I haven't done that yet. People who've rented an e-scooter are interested in buying one, which I think makes sense. E-scooter inexperience is a key factor in collisions. That also makes sense given discussion we've just had. Riders do feel safe, but they also have some concerns. Often the concerns are around the lights and the lighting. Is it bright enough? Is it obvious enough? Which is curious because that's a kind of key part of the construction and use type regulation stuff that'll be needed if these are to become road legal. So that one's particularly interesting. People worried about whether they're bright enough at night. Curious one, users also felt that the infrastructure and quality of roads needed to be improved to aid safety, particularly citing a lack of segregated lanes away from other vehicles. Yeah, I can agree with that. But while most riders did feel safe in cycle lanes, some did cite concerns of cyclists riding aggressively. Yeah, I can believe that too. Also, the majority of e-scooter riders consider the machines less safe than other forms of transport, with the examples of mopeds and motorbikes. Okay. Pedestrians remain concerned about e-scooters. I think we discussed is the last one. I think Andrew and I discussed that quite a lot, particularly in conjunction with Canterbury and closing and finishing off their e-scooter trial early because of pedestrian concerns. One place that isn't closing off its e-scooter trial early is Northamptonshire. I'm sure Andrew slipped this one in just for my benefit. So yes, the Northampton, Colby, Wellingborough, Kettering trial run by Voy is going to continue into May 2024 as well. So I might almost be back by then. So yes, I think. I mean, I don't know how much you've been following it, Alex, but we've been sort of looking at the different ways, different councils and areas of the country seem to be viewing these e-scooter trials. In some cases as an inconvenience, in other cases they do seem to be working quite well and communicating together with the scooter people and local police forces and stuff. And it's quite an interesting differences across the country. And Northamptonshire is one of those ones where everybody does seem to be working together and being friends and making suggestions to each other and carrying them out. So it was nice to see that one seems to be a success and is continuing.
I guess if it's had that kind of if it has been shown to work in that way, there's no reason to pull the plug on it.
Exactly. Also, it's better than walking sometimes.
Unless you fall off. In
the rain, when you've walked out the way to the centre of town, it can be nice to get home more quickly. That's my justification. I'm repeating it.
We are getting we don't have scooters here, but we are getting segregated cycle lanes, like properly segregated cycle lanes with plants and pavements between them throughout kind of the centre of Cardiff, and the works have been quite disruptive. But the end result is going to make it a lot easier to get around by vehicles other than cars, although a lot harder to get around in a car, which is presumably the intent.
Here, well, I think I still count as Greater Boston, so I'm just outside what's Boston proper by about 200 meters or so, and thanks to a river. And here, in Boston, they're not so bad, but there's actually quite a few bits where there are segregated cycle lanes and cycle paths and cycle routes. The rest of Massachusetts, they have this thing which appears in the Massachusetts Driver's Manual, which is like the highway code, but not as good. And it's this symbol, which is a bicycle and two little arrows, and that's called a sharrow. I swear, I'm not making that up. That's what it says in the driver's manual. It's called a sharrow. Yeah. And that indicates to drivers that this is a shared space and bicycles are welcome to use as much of the lane as they wish. The trouble is, I'm sure that 90+% of people on the road in Massachusetts at the minute probably haven't read the driver's manual since that was introduced, and probably have no idea whatsoever what that actually is and what it means. But then people tend to be quite polite, depressingly polite drivers here anyway, in the main. But yeah, here we've got the sharrow, and I did see another article somewhere, another motoring website, commenting that really that didn't count as infrastructure. That wasn't good enough. So we'll see what happens. It'd be nice to see a few more bike lanes around here anyway.
We used to have a lot of them here where they would appear and then disappear. So you'd kind of you'd be going along in your bike lane, and then all of a sudden it would just vanish. Speaking of evolving transport, the Geospatial Commission, which is a government department looking at how you can use geospatial data for better kind of planning of spaces and road infrastructure, has published a report looking at how this data can support the rollout of electric vehicle charge points, which is actually something that I know commercial fleets have been doing for a while in terms of looking, using that, using telematics data to see where people stop, for how long they stop, and then kind of where you can incorporate, charging stops within a duty cycle. And they're basically, the idea is that you'll use this data then to deploy charge points where they're actually required, and kind of develop a network then that works for everybody. So it's looking at future demand, where the right sites are, and how to then create a sort of a seamless consumer experience and roll all of that out. So they will be doing a feasibility study to look at how to model that demand and provide planners with the right data they need to identify sites and work out how many charge points they need and when they'll need it. Create a data set for off-street parking so that planners can identify sites where charge points are needed and avoid wasting effort, and make that data more available, more findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, so that innovators can use that to create new services which enhance consumer experience. Essentially, they're looking here to sort of streamline the rollout of the charging network across the UK, which is a very sensible approach, I think.
It seems a bit bleeding obvious to me, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About you, it sounds like the kind of thing. I guess really there's a couple of phases whenever you're rolling out something, like a charging infrastructure. Then first of all, you go, well, here's the guesswork of where we think it is. Here's where we kind of think we want it. Here's where it's practical to put it at this stage, which may or may not match that first guesswork.
That's the issue, yeah.
And then the third point is, okay, now we've got some people moving around and able to go to places. We've got an idea of roughly where they are. Now we can use the information of which of those scattergun places they use to then work out and be more targeted in the future about what we put and where we put it, and things. So I guess whilst it sounds like, you should have been doing this right from the start, then in reality, you can't just go straight in with that, because you need the people you need some baseline of data to start from, and to do that, you've got to use the scattergun and the guesswork and you've got to use the guesswork and the where's practical approach to actually get that baseline before you can analyze it in more detail. Did that make sense, or was that just a lot of consultant waffle? Because it's quite possible it's consultant waffle.
That makes sense. I would say that on top of that, part of the problem is that it's been a very kind of market-led approach to rolling infrastructure out so far,
Mm.
in that the big demand sites are the areas where you'll get a lot of footfall from EV drivers, and where you can make, you can kind of claw back the investment in putting things in place there. It's not cheap to put this infrastructure in place, especially in rural areas. And actually, in some cases, Wales is still pretty dreadful for charging infrastructure. And actually, a lot of the areas that probably just need a few, not loads and loads and loads, because obviously the traffic is not necessarily huge. It's not like, say, South Mims or Hopwood Park or places like that where you've got lots of people passing through. It's finding those sites where they are critical as part of just giving people the confidence to go electric, but where there might not be much money in it at the start. Just kind of identifying where those bottlenecks are in the system.
I don't know if you've been watching, if you've had a chance to watch many of Ian Seabrook's videos recently. But he did the series with the where they had that loan stroke lease Fiat 500e, and he was quite, he has no at home charging availability, and he can't charge the unit either. So he'd been discovering some of the local charging points that were within the sort of included in the rental of the 500e. But he's obviously, it's kind of got into his head because he was there's a video from Aberystwyth just on at the weekend there, and he pointed out that the hotel where the classic car meet was being held in the car park, he said, now of course they've got a Tesla supercharger here at Aberystwyth, which is a good one to know about because it's one of the ones that's open to all brands. So it's kind of funny, and people have had an EV for a little while and stuff, just making a point of saying, no, there's a really good charger here, particularly in Wales where there's very little charging infrastructure, as you say. Then it just kind of, it made me laugh that it was that even Ian was pointing stuff like that out. I shouldn't really say even Ian. That sounds really bad, but
it's encouraging that second-hand market on top of the new market. There's a lot of, as much as the latest EVs can do sort of 200 plus miles to a single charge, there's a solid market out there, for older vehicles where they can do 80 to 100 miles, between charges, where people may not have off-street parking, or the ability to have even on the street kind of public charging, where they just need a few local rapid chargers that you can go and top up and do your weekly kind of pootling in.
A friend of mine who does have off-street parking in his own Chargepoint has run an early Nissan Leaf for the last few years, as well as his Discovery. His Disco 4, and said, it's great. We use the Discovery for long journeys or whenever we have to carry loads of stuff and all the family, but for everything else, dodging back and forth to school, to the shops, to whatever else, it doesn't matter that the Leaf's only got 60, 70 miles of range. It never does more than 25, 30 at once.
And it's that confidence thing as well, isn't it? Of knowing that of having alternatives, if you turn up somewhere and it's busy or it's out of action or something's not working, it's knowing then that you've got something fairly nearby. And Wales is terrible, still terrible for that certainly in terms of rapid chargers. If you look at ZapMap, there's masses of charging points, but they're mostly kind of 3 and 7 kilowatt units, which
is, if you're doing more than, if you're there for less than a day, is not always great. It can be just enough. But remember, I think the closest we went to Wales whenever we were doing Charge Around Britain, admittedly, which is quite a few years ago, and the charging infrastructure generally has increased massively since then. But I think the closest we got to Wales was Hereford. We just avoided it because there was nothing. There was one charger, I think, somewhere at the top, and so one charger somewhere at the bottom, and we just weren't prepared to take the risk at the time. It's better than that now, but
only just.
But yeah, not a lot. Yeah.
Well, embarrassing. I did some filming with the BBC, but I think it would have been 2014, and at the time I had a Renault Zoe, and they were doing the filming actually up in Aberystwyth. This is pre Tesla supercharger appearing there. and it was a piece about electric vehicles and dispelling some myths and so on and so forth. So they wanted me to come up and do that. They wanted me to bring the Zoe, but getting from Cardiff to Aberystwyth in the Renault Zoe, which would do about 80 miles on the motorway, was easy. Cardiff to Pontabram, which is on the end of the M4, rapid charge there, straight up to Aberystwyth, easy. Get to Aberystwyth, I've then got I think it was like a 7 or 8 hour wait on the fastest charge point that was there at the time. And I was like, well, I've only got like a couple of hours of filming. I'm not planning on staying in Aberystwyth for a whole day just to wait for the thing to charge so I can get back via Pontabram. And trying to explain this in a way where it's kind of going, look, you can get here, and if you were visiting somebody overnight, you'd have no problem. But for a meeting like this, there are still gaps, and that's where there's So I think it's a good move on the government's part to kind of really highlight those areas where you need that, where you need those charge points and really tend to those bottlenecks in the network, because they are still there.
Yeah, sorry, I took that off on one heck of a tangent just there. I'm sorry about that, but yes, nicely brought back. You can come back again.
Despite the fumbling of words. And
that's normal. Anyway, we fumbled our words right the way through until Guilt Minute. Yes, it's the first one of the year. And so I'm just going to take a quick moment to say thank you up at the start of this to everyone who supported us over the last year, whether financially or just with help or just opinion and feedback and all that stuff. It matters so it makes such a difference. It really does. So thank you so much. However, this is Guilt Minute, and I have a script to read, so I'm going to do it now. It's that quick break in the show where we ask for a tad of financial support to keep the lights on, the hosting running. If you feel the Motoring Podcast is worth a small consideration every month, then you can become a patron. Different levels of patron include different levels of commitment from us to you, including being able to watch the show recorded live. We also have a small range of merchandise in our spring store, from stickers to mugs and t-shirts. If you don't have any spare cash, and we completely understand, then you can help us by following for free from a podcast player to receive every show as they're released, and by liking and rating the show in whatever way your podcast supplier lets you. If you've done all that, and some of you do, so thank you very much once again, then the last thing you can do is to recommend us to your friends or colleagues. Yes, a couple of other bits of news. I'm loath to start it as an obituary section. But a couple of people we should really sort of mention passed away since the last time we recorded one of these. And the first is the designer Tom Karen OBE. So he headed Ogle Design for a long, long time, responsible for quite a few vehicles. I think Reliance in particular is most linked with. So things like the Scimitar GTE, the Bond Bug, the Reliant Robin. Also, there was the ogle-bodied Aston Martin Vantage as well around. But it wasn't just all about cars. He designed lots of other stuff, which I think if you're my kind of age, are quite seminal. If you didn't have them as a toy, you're definitely aware of them. So things like even like the marble run, where you get the sort of plastic parts and you can build a sort of whole path for a marble. If you drop it in at the top, it'll run down towers and round loops and stuff. That was him. And the Rally Chopper as well, of course, which is another particularly famous piece of toy stroke transport design there as well. So those and many, many more items. Luke Skywalker's land speeder was Tom Karen and Ogle Design. There was something else that was in my head there. Oh yeah, Sinclair C5 as well, from Ogle Design as well. So really, really instrumental in lots and lots of bits of transport design and product design and toy design over the last 40, 50 years. So yes, he's passed away peacefully at the age of 96. There'll be loads of big, long, proper, grown-up obituaries, I'm sure, appearing in all the various classic car magazines and sites over the next little while, if they're not there already.
It's an ageless toy, the Marble Run. Of all the toys that the
Yeah.
kids have got here, I've never seen one that the visiting adults have been drawn to more than my kids' Marble Run. Build stuff at hours with it. It's one of those things that just doesn't go out of fashion at all.
Yeah, I never actually had one. Curiously, now that I think about it, but I actually almost bought one for my nephew for Christmas, and then I got distracted and bought him electric diggers instead.
Ah, yes. Well, also ageless in its own way.
Yes, well, they are to me anyway.
Yes, of course. The year was also darkened by the loss of Ken Block on just after the New Year. Ken Block, of course, founder of DC Shoes, although sold that off quite a while ago, but more well known recently for really growing the popularity of the World Rally Championship and rallying in the US, and also his Gymkhana videos, which have gone viral since I think the first one came out in 2009. Initially with Subaru, then with Ford, and then most recently with Audi. Only a few weeks ago, actually, the Audi one with him kind of burning around Las Vegas, shredding tyres. Co-founder of the Hoonigan brand, which if you've been to any car shows over the last decade, you will probably have come across the odd Hoonigan sticker or graphic. It's just
any supermarket car park, I think.
Yeah, it's just one of those kind of really, just a really all-round influential character and a really lovely guy as well. Just a genuine car enthusiast, seemingly just doing what he loved. So very sad to hear that he passed away in a just an unfortunate accident in the dreadful weather that they've been having over in the United States at the moment on his ranch in Utah. Flipped a snowmobile over and was killed instantly, as I understand it. So leaves behind a wife and kids and a lot of grieving car enthusiasts and colleagues. It's just an all-round good egg. A real loss to the car scene.
Yeah, and there've been a lot of very, very nice words said about him as well and written about him. I mean, I'll link from the show notes to the Dirtfish Remembering Ken Block article, which is written by one of his by a writer who knew him quite well. So I'll link to that. But so many nice obituaries been written,
and almost all positive. Just a man without any shred of the ego that he could very easily have amassed with that sort of a portfolio.
That is basically the theme. Yeah, absolutely. Just about being accessible and nice and human, really. Moving on from that, because sadly, that is the motorsport news this week. But moving on from that, then. Just as a quick announcement, REVS Restore. So some of you may be familiar with the sort of whole the REVS project, which is one of the sort of automotive-based, I would say mental health, and just generally happiness, ability to speak to people type projects. It's run by Reverend Adam Gompert, whom we've spoken to and about plenty of times before, but they've got a number of weekends set aside this year, one a month actually, to where people can help get involved in restoring a Series 3 Land Rover, I think it is. Yeah, Series 3 Land Rover. At the Heritage Skills Academy at Bicester. If you'd like more information on that, then I'm sure if you're on the REVS Facebook page, you'll be able to find it there. If not, I'll link to the news press release on it, which has all of the dates and all of the various contact details if you want to find out more about that.
New car news, somewhat lacking as you might expect over Christmas and the New Year, but there have been some moves at Kia. Looking at the designer's mood board, Karim Habib, the ex-BMW and Infiniti designer, has been promoted within Hyundai Motor Group from head of Kia Global Design to executive president. He's the man behind the EV6. We've got the link to the full story will be included in the show notes on that one. It's on the Car Design News website. So
yes, So well-deserved promotion, I think. The yes, Kia and Hyundai both are getting such great reviews on their design and styling work. I think it's impressive stuff he's been doing.
Smashing it out of the park at the moment.
They are just a bit. Speaking of design and styling, though, Lunchtime read falls to me this week. And funnily enough, it is all about small SUVs as well. So, bit of a complex one, this one, folks. It's all about that awful image, which I can't stand, where all the context has been removed from a set of many, was that 6 by 6, 9, 72 different SUVs. And people going, oh, well, everything looks the same, and design is dead and all that kind of stuff. Well, there's an article on LinkedIn by the person who collated and put that image together, pointing out that in actual fact, that image is being used with the whole design is dead phrase completely wrongly. And actually, he put it together himself to actually illustrate the opposite. So, link in the show notes to the to as I say that article by Adi Hanft. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm so sorry. They're talking about that and how annoyed he is that however many millions of people are agreeing that design is dead as a result. And there's also a link to the chapter of his book from within that LinkedIn article, the chapter in his book where that he created that image for. So the image has been taken from his book, basically, and with no credit to him. Yay for social media sharing. Yes. And it's a chapter called Driving Conformity. The link to that is at the bottom of the LinkedIn page, but I would like traffic to flow via his LinkedIn page. I know that sounds dumb. I can't stand LinkedIn either, but I think that reading his kind of response to that social media is an important sort of step on the way through. There you go. I am. Of course, you can completely ignore me. Just scroll to the bottom and click on the link anyway. But I'm going to try and help you consume the information, consume the content in a logical way. So yes, I think that's because I just hate that image because there's so much context. I hate that image in the way that it was being used on social media, because for a point where it showed things like there's a Mitsubishi ASX somewhere in there, I think, and it shows it as exactly the same scale as a Lamborghini Urus, a Bentley Bentayga, or a Mercedes. What's it called this week? It used to be the GL class,
GLS, the big one, yeah,
the big one. It's not. It's different. And you're sort of completely, you're looking at it from the side. You're not looking at any of the, most of the telltales of brands, etc., tend to involve the sort of frontal aspect and front fascia of the vehicle, and that you can't see any of that, and so I really dislike the way that social media has repeated this image and this design is dead ethos, because it's a word that Andrew would edit out, and I can't be bothered, so I'm just not going to use the word. It's just rubbish, basically, the way that people have understood it, and yeah.
And it's the implication that this has never been the case before, that you wouldn't find similarities in terms of silhouettes of cars from any era.
You see, there's you see the supermarket car park pictures, from the Sainsbury's archive that go out. I have real trouble telling that stuff apart. I really do. And then you get even further back, stuff like telling Austins apart from standard Triumphs, from all sorts of other stuff like that. It's not impossible. They're all the same flipping size, shape, etc. It is thus, and it will always be thus.
Yes.
And it is.
There are certainly trends, but it's not. Design is never dead, is it?
No.
And yes, you'll certainly find similar. There was another one about 10 years ago where it was showing 5 cars from 2012 and 5 cars from, I don't know, the 60s or 70s, and it was kind of the 5 cars from the 60s were like a coupe and a really square 4x4 and a saloon car and an estate, and it was kind of, and the ones now are all kind of all SUVs. And you go, yes, but if you found modern equivalents of the cars that you're showing in this, you probably find there's even more variation in terms of silhouettes today than there was back then, because you can do more with shared platforms and all the rest of it. It's there's opportunities to do all sorts of different things with the same foundations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway, go read, please, people. Yes, I don't like that one. But so, do you want to take us on? Speaking of vehicles with similar silhouettes, do you want to take us to the list of the week, Alex?
Yeah. So the list of the week this week is actually, ironically, if you were considering an SUV, we're Haggerty and friend of the show, Gavin Braithwaite-Smith, has suggested 10 jacked up estate cars as an alternative to that SUV you might have been thinking about buying. And boy, there's some good ones on here, as you might well expect.
There are only 10. So do you want to pick one, Alex, that's your favourite?
Yes, it makes no sense, mine probably, but I've always been drawn to the Subaru Legacy Outback. I've always really liked them. Technically, possibly not the best on the list, but yes, I've always really liked them.
They are 10 a penny around here.
I can't bet. Yes, yeah.
This side of the Subaru XV stroke Crosstrek, then they are like the car of New England and Massachusetts, just everywhere. Was somebody recently commenting, "Oh, Subaru's going to stop making cars soon?" It's like, yeah, no, they might stop. IM might stop importing them into the UK, but don't be under the impression that Subaru aren't selling cars, because they are.
Yes, yeah. How about
you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
have you got a pick on that list?
I do. Do you know what? And it's only because I saw one on my way back from Canada just after Christmas. I'm going to go with the AMC Eagle wagon as being one of the founders of that. It's probably not my favorite. If I was offered the choice of all of them, it's not the one I would have. I would have one of the others. But I actually saw one in real life, and in fact, it wasn't the wagon; it was the coupe, which was still jacked up and 4-wheel drive, and it was really cool to actually finally see one, because you've seen them on YouTube and stuff and pictures, but I'd never seen one in real life. So
there's a very nice, in a similar, not quite as I don't want to use the word vintage, but of a similar idea to these. There's a very, very nice V90 Ocean Race near us. It's a stunning thing, white with silver and orange accents, and every time I see it,
is it the white one? I only ever noticed the blue ones.
Oh no, this is the latest. Yeah. The
latest one.
The newest ones, yeah, with the kind of additional bits in the back for you to kind of wash your wetsuit and store your wetsuit and all the rest of it. So it's very, very cool. Yeah. Utterly pointless for me, because I don't sail, but yeah, it's a very cool car nonetheless. It's a very stylish thing.
It's not the point. You can still aspire to sail.
Yes, yeah.
Anyway, let's end up this week with the and finally, and the and finally is Ford. And if you want pictures of cars that look like Fords from all the eras, and then they have opened up their Ford Heritage Vault. Got more than 1,600 pics of every car it's ever sold in the UK. So a lot of the old press images being shared. And yes, if you are now back at work and looking for another rabbit hole to go down whilst looking like you're working at your desk, this could well be a very good one to have. So yes, there'll be a link to a quick article about it with some of the best ofs from Top Gear magazine, but there will also be a link directly to the Heritage Vault as well. So we'll be tucking those in. Parish notes, not really. 2 special editions out over Christmas, as you probably noticed. Andrew with a Kia EV6. And me talking about giving the family-friendly version of buy a car in the USA. I could quite easily have filled 2 hours worth of swearing and ranting, but I didn't because I was being good. And talking about the Scion TC, which I have over here as well, and how I find it and what it's like and what it is and all these other things that people generally don't know because it was never sold in Europe. That's that. That's those. Anything you feel I've missed, Alex?
Not off the top of my head, but yes.
Okie doke. If that's the case, then don't forget, folks, that between now and next week, you can give us any feedback. Share your thoughts of the show at Motoring Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, and on the contact page of motoringpodcast.com, the hub of all our activities. Remember, you can support us financially via Patreon, and please leave a review and rating on Apple Podcasts or however your podcast app lets you do such a thing. Alex, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably best at the moment on I'm still on Twitter at Alex Grant UK, but I'm also now on Mastodon, which is Alex Grant UK at toot.wales.
I think if people just search for the first name, then it will generally come up, or they can find it via my Mastodon profile as well.
So yeah, on those as well. So I've got a multi-platform these days. So, but yeah, still probably most active on Twitter if you wish to get in touch. How about you?
Best way to get in touch with me, just the same. It's generally via Twitter. I'm at AJP Bradley. Same username on Mastodon if you want to connect there ahead of the impending crash. Andrew will be back next week, but until then, I've been Alan Bradley.
I've been Alex Grant.
And safe motoring. People are going to complain because I didn't spell out my surname. Oops, never mind.